Is it say that it's recording now?
It gave me the 3, 2, 1 countdown, and I got a record light on my side.
Okay, sweet. Thanks. Welcome to Going In Blind. I'm your host, Zach Tidwell, and my guest this week spent 21 years as a police officer. He's a lifelong musician, and when he finished his career, he was working as a homicide and child abuse detective. I'm sure we're probably going to get into some heavy waters today, but before we do that, just a couple of quick announcements as usual. If you guys aren't familiar with my personal story yet, if you're new to the show, head over to my website and you can read a little bit about it there and see some of the other stuff that I'm up to, and join my mailing list so that you can get announcements about some big projects that I have going on behind the scenes right now when they do start making their way into the world. But without any further ado, we're keeping it short and sweet on the intro this week. Please welcome Mr. Aaron Turnage. Aaron, how's it going?
It's great, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I think it's been, I guess I didn't even realize it until today, like getting everything set up for this. It feels, I thought it was more recent that we'd connected, but it's been a little bit since I was on your podcast.
Yeah,
now.
it's been a few months. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. So I didn't realize it had been that long, but I think, we've gotten to dig into my stuff on your podcast, but I want to start here maybe with just the simple question of what drew you into police work? I think especially, that's a common thing to ask, but especially today, I think a lot of people, I hope things are starting to come back around where people are starting to respect the police a lot more now, but I think hearing maybe what draws someone like you into that line of work is important for people to hear.
Sure, no problem. So I got involved I went on my first ride along when I was 8 years old. I was born and raised in Alaska, and I was driven. I had some friends that were police officers. Nobody in my family was, but I had seen them. They were Alaska State Troopers. They had a nice shiny uniform and nice cars. At about
Sweet
8 years
hats.
old, I started looking for a ride along to go on. And they told me no because I was too young, and I kept pestering, and finally I got to go on my first ride along at 8. At 13 years old, I joined the Explorer Post, and there was no doubt after that first ride along that that's what I wanted to do for a career. In my Explorer Post, I was there from about 13 to 17 years old. I rode about 4,000 hours in uniform as a second person in a police car, so I got exposed to all the stuff you would imagine, from car crashes to theft to domestic violence to dead bodies, all of that. There was that experience between 13 and 17.
Whoa.
I went off, got my degree in California, Arizona. Then I went back to Alaska and was a police officer in Alaska for about 9.5 years prior to moving down to the Pacific Northwest. When I came down to the Pacific Northwest, I lateraled down, meaning I went from one police agency to another, and I was a police officer there for about 13.5 years, and my last 11 years I spent as a homicide and child abuse detective. And what drew me into it, I think it was just my initial exposure to some of the Alaska State Troopers, their uniform, and just what they stood for. They showed up. They had great command presence, which I didn't know at the time what that was, but they came in and they just took charge and were assertive and, helped people out. And that's what drew me to it.
It's that air about, it's that confidence of someone like you. You totally do pick up on that. I'm guessing in the academies, they probably teach you guys that command presence, like you said, like specifically that being I guess the strategy there. But you mentioned, with like you had family friends that were officers, but as a teenager, you got exposed to all that stuff. You said 13 to 17, and like it was bodies and everything.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. 13 to 17 is when I was with the Explorer Post. And yeah, I got involved in everything. If there was a call that came in, I went on hundreds or thousands of calls during those 4 years. I rode 4,000 hours, so I went on a lot of calls, and I never got left out of anything. So all the exposures you can imagine. I dealt with my first dead body at 13 years old. That was my first death investigation that I got to be involved in. And by that, I mean I got to put on gloves and roll over the body and palpate the body from head to toe to look for defects or injuries or blunt trauma or something like that. This body had been laying out in the woods for about 7.5 months before they found it. So that was my first exposure, and that was literally one of my first ride-alongs as an explorer at 13 years old.
Was that program, the Explorer program, is that unique, or is that pretty common across the country, or at least in Alaska? Like, I mean, that it seems like you were in on, at least you yourself were immersed in that to like the umpteenth degree. 4,000 hours in a couple of years is crazy for a teenager. So, like, yeah, did you see other programs even similar to that as you were working as a police officer too?
Yeah, so there's Explorer and cadet programs all across the country. The Explorer program is actually ran by the Boy Scouts of America, but it's for both boys and girls. And it's a way for young youth to explore a career field of their choice to see if that's what they wanted to do. When I came into the Explorer post, there was no doubt that's what I was going to do. And there was no limits on it. So you can get involved as much or as little. I think your requirement was one, meeting a week, or one meeting every 2 weeks or something. But you can get involved as much as you want. And I chose to, jump into the deep end on this and get all that exposure. I knew it's what I wanted to do. I enjoyed doing it. It didn't make me popular at, teenage parties, but it was at least fun for me to go out and do. I knew this was going to be my career.
They're like, fucking narc. Get him out of here.
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
I've still got people that hate me because they think I narked on them as a 16-year-old. I could give two shits what they were doing.
Wow.
I just, I just had my thing. And, the people that really knew me the weekends I wasn't with the police. I was out partying and having keggers myself. So, I mean, it's a teenage world, but mine was a little bit different.
Yeah, I guess that with those kinds of people, are those, one, I guess, was it a small town, and are those people still living in that small town? Because that seems like that's where that mentality would come from, where you're still pissy about that kind of stuff.
You hit the nail on the head, man. Yeah, it's a small town. The entire Kenai Peninsula had 70,000 people. My town had probably 8 to 10. And, full-time residents. And yeah, those people are still in the town, and they still act like children.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, small town dynamics like that are interesting. It's weird to, I moved all over the place growing up, but my first high school was in a little teeny tiny town. It was like my last 2 years of middle school, and then first 2 years of high school, we were in that little town. And even now, I see people from that town on social media who are all still there, and like no one ever left a little, a couple thousand people town. And I have a hard time understanding that, but I do, I would get the lowdown on some of that stuff, even like as an adult. It's strange to me. It's like its own little biosphere going on where people get sucked into that little gravity well of that little place and then never leave. But it's interesting. So being all the way up there and in such a remote place, how much of that, because I know you said you went to Arizona for college, but when you became an officer, was it back in that little town, that little area?
It was, yeah. So the police department that I spent most of my time with growing up was police department in Kenai, Alaska. And that is the department that I went back and worked 9.5 years for. So I went back and worked with a lot of the guys that I used to ride with as an explorer. They were my mentors as an explorer. I went back and rode with them, as a police officer, worked alongside them as a police officer. Wow. And that had a lot of, that was very, very positive for me. I had a lot of relationships that were already built and established, and trust that was established. So that was good. And it was easy for me to jump right into, one of the things in law enforcement, I'm not sure what it's like in the military, but one of the things in law enforcement is getting accepted, kind of into the fold, into the group. Mm-hmm. And you show up as a new recruit or a new rookie, and, you don't know what you're doing. And there's a lot of question. There's a lot of judgment early on. Are they going to be able to step up and fight when they need to? Are they going to be able to engage? Do they have common sense? Are they going to be able to think through a problem? And for me, when I went back, everybody already knew what I was made of. So that was kind of nice for me.
Yeah. Because, 4,000 hours sounds like, it was like a full-time job in your teenage years, essentially. So I get that typical kind of process, that timeline of working your way in. You spent a whole career as an officer. How long is that kind of a case by case thing where people tend to work their way in? And I ask this because, in the when I was in the Marines, like in the infantry specifically, there's a certain kind of hell that boots are put through for, and you are a boot until you've come back from your first deployment, and then you get a new wave of Marines coming in that you then become a senior Marine too. And it's, a year and a half ish. It was for us, at least timeline wise, of just it's miserable for that first year and a half. I mean, you're just getting your dick run into the dirt and hazed the whole time. So like I know that's kind of a different dynamic, but it's very, it's paramilitary-esque. And it seems like, especially out in a remote area like that, it would probably be even a different level of things. Yeah.
Yeah. I understand your question. There is some of that. When you come into law enforcement, when you're a new guy coming into the police department, you're getting put into a world where all of a sudden you're expected to make decisions. You're expected to make the decision of taking somebody's life or removing somebody's freedom or engaging in a street fight, to back up your partner. And all of that stuff are unknowns. And as police officers that are seasoned, that are out there, we want to know that when that cover car shows up, that the person inside of it has what it takes to send me home to my family at night. So there is a lot of distrust and, I would say, guardedness, and there's a field training process and all of that. But amongst the officers, the established officers, there's a lot of distrust and just kind of waiting to see, what the product is going to be. We don't really haze and do all that kind of stuff like I'm hearing you say about the military. We don't do that. But you definitely feel like you're not part of the mix, and on the agency I was in Alaska is a smaller agency, so there wasn't so much of it. But my bigger agency that I was in the Pacific Northwest, we had 150 cops or something like that, town of 140,000, very violent city, lots of murder, that type of stuff. And in that environment, I wouldn't say there was hazing, but there was definitely, it was definitely harder for the recruits in that environment.
But dynamics wise, and I guess work wise too, because it seems being out in the boonies in Alaska, a lot of that work would probably be out in the woods and stuff like that. But dynamics wise, what was it like when you did switch to move down to the Pacific Northwest, and why did you switch?
Yeah. So Alaska is a last frontier. And when you're in Alaska, even as a city police officer, you carry enough gear in your trunk to do whatever you need to do. And if that means you need to sleep in a snowbank overnight, then you carry that gear for it. You carry the rope, you carry the rescue bags for water rescue, you carry chainsaws to get trees out of the road. And it's a very, even in the urban city, it's a very rural way of thinking, because even in my city, there were times where my cover, if I had cover, it was an hour away. You have to be prepared for everything that you get into, from a lethal force encounter to removing a tree out of the road, in 4 feet of snow. When I moved down to the Pacific Northwest, it was different. People are people no matter where you go. And when people have problems, they all react the same way. Some people are cool, some people are assholes, some people add alcohol and drugs, which make them unpredictable. But at the end of the day, people are people and they have problems, whether you're in a town of 300 or a town of 3,000, it doesn't really matter. So when I got down to the lower 48, Pacific Northwest, and started working, there was a lot more folks there. And there was no trees to remove out of the road, but there was a lot of gangs. There was a lot of murder and stabbings and armed robberies. In my city in Alaska, we might get one armed robbery every 18 months, 2 years. In my city in Pacific Northwest, we get armed robberies every single day. So that just kind of shows you the dynamics of calls that we would go on. So you have to be harder, faster in the lower 48 Pacific Northwest, in my city there, than I did in Alaska. I learned more in 1 month on the job in my Pacific Northwest city than I did 9 years in Alaska.
Was it more engaging and more rewarding being down there in a more dynamic environment?
Yeah, it was. It was different. It was different. But at the end of the day, yeah, I think it was more rewarding. And for me specifically, I was on the road for about 2.5 years when I went into detectives. And then when I went into detectives, I started working child abuse and homicide almost right away. And that's where I spent the next 11 years of my career. So my career, took a change from chasing dime bags of dope on the street, and now I'm putting away child molesters and murderers. I'm sending them to prison for the rest of their life. So that was definitely more rewarding and fulfilling for me. But it also had a dark side too.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you about that next here, because I'm very curious. I want to know about all of it, like what the pipeline is to shifting into that. But I was curious specifically, I guess, with the small town dynamics up there, and probably running into the same kind of people that still have beef with you, however many years later now, for stuff that they assumed you were doing as a teenager. Is it tough as a police officer in a small town like that? Because, where it is, it's people that and that you've probably some are very familiar with. How does that change operationally? How does that change how you have to do things? Is it harder to disconnect from work when you go home? Do you get stuff that kind of spills over from work into your personal life because it is such a small town? Can you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. So all of the above are true. Working in a small town, you see the same people, and there's a benefit to it. When you work in a town of 8,000 people, and you're driving down the road, you know what everybody's driving. You know who all the criminals are. You know who's moving drugs. You know who's running guns. You know who the burglars are. And it's easy. It's literally shooting fish in a barrel. You're like, oh, there's Isidore Shagnasty. His driver's license suspended. You turn on him and you get into a vehicle pursuit. It's pretty simple. So all these people, and that is good. Small town policing, absolutely right. I know a lot of the people that I'm arresting. My last name in the community I lived in was big. My dad was big in the oil field, and he was very, very well known in that community, and we grew up in that community. I grew up around there. So now, if they don't know me, they know my family or my legacy or my dad. Yeah. So I've got all of that. I've arrested my nephew.
What?
So yeah, policing in a small town is definitely different, and the dynamics are different. But I think the one thing that you have to remember is that people want to be respected. I don't care how hard your gangbanger is, or how hard your murderer is, or your child molester. At the end of the day, these are human beings, and they have made a bad decision or a series of bad decisions that got them crossed with the law for some reason. But you strip all that crap away. Strip away their nonsense that they've done. Strip away my badge, gun, and authority, and you're two human beings talking to each other. And I think one of the things you really have to learn, and what taught me by policing in a small town, is how to talk to people, how to get rid of the stigma, oh, you're a murderer, oh, you're a child molester, oh, you just beat your wife, whatever it is. Get rid of all of that and connect with this person as a human being. At the end of the day, we're worried about our bills, how we're going to get our daughter to gymnastics, what we're having for dinner on Thanksgiving, and who's coming over. We all have those same thoughts and values and worries. And when we connect people on that level, now you can make them do things you want. In Alaska, if your cover's 2 hours away and you got some big guy on the side of the road you have to take to jail for whatever reason, he's not going, he doesn't want to go, you have to be able to talk him into those handcuffs. You just can't kill everybody that doesn't want to go with you and go with the program. Yeah. So you have to learn how to communicate. And that is the thing that small town policing, the dynamic that small town policing really taught me, was how to communicate, how to be effective in that, and get people to join kind of my team and what I wanted to do.
Was that something instilled into you, or something you just kind of recognized and learned over time?
Well, they talk about, in the academy, you talked about command presence, and they talk about command presence. There used to be a use of force continuum, and that's what I'll talk about, but essentially a triangle. So imagine the top of the triangle is when you show up, and the bottom of the triangle is when you show up. The top of the triangle, is lethal force. When you show up, you have command presence, you take charge of the scene, you look good, your boots are shined, blah, blah, blah. People respect you, command authority, and you get the job done without using force. And then it slowly steps up to physical force, so on and so forth. As far as the communication, they tell you that you got to talk to people, and you need to learn how to communicate. But I think for me, I'm a Christian. I've been in church my entire police career, and I think that there's a lot of core values that I take away from that. Just treating people like human beings. And I think that is a me thing, not something they teach. You can command presence, but you still got the guy that shows up looking like a sack of shit and can't wear a uniform to save his life, and couldn't command presence in a grocery store. And then you've got people that can really communicate, and you've got people that can't. You got people that would rather go hands on and fight, or, be dicks, or, continue to chastise the people for whatever they did, because they get all emotional. You got to strip the emotion out of it. And once you strip the emotion out, it allows you to be able to talk. And that is something that I learned just from doing the career.
It's interesting, obviously you and I have only interacted on a very small period of time here, but it's even in talking to you on your podcast, like you strike me as being very analytical and very just kind of matter of fact with things. So I was curious, like, and very even keeled, I guess, too. Like even your tone of voice when you're talking about this stuff is very just like, it's very level, I guess, the whole time. So I was curious about it. And I'm also with that idea that you talked about of, everyone knowing you knowing everyone in the community, you also knowing what to expect from certain people. And when you're encountering certain individuals in a smaller town like that, you hear police officers talk about, it's an interesting field and situation that officers are put in, where every person that they encounter typically is someone, it isn't a total stranger. You don't know if it's that person on a good day, on a bad day. You don't know if that person is running from something, if they have a warrant out there. You do not know what to expect. So you are on high alert every time that you pull a car over, every time that you're encountering someone new, because you don't know what's going to happen. And when the time that you do drop your guard because someone seems disarming is when that will get you killed. Do you feel like having that awareness, because it is such a small community, do you feel like that alleviates any of that, or like that alleviated any of that for you as opposed to when you were in a bigger city?
No, I think that, no, and again, people are people, no matter what size city you're in, small or big. For me, everybody that I interacted with, I'm a lot more calm now than I used to be. I used to be super high strung before I came out of law enforcement. There's been a lot of change since I come out. But when I was in law enforcement, I was a high strung guy. And, when I'm dealing with people, I'm always on. I'm always, ready, expecting the worst. I want to be nice to them, but I'm expecting the worst. And you're right. The people in a small town, or people in any town, you deal with them 15 times and they've been great. Well, the 16th time, they're having a really bad day. And all of a sudden, side of this, I'll tell you a story that literally exemplifies this idea about one day we're great and the next day they're bad. But no, whether it's small town or big town, dealing with people, for me, I always had to be ready. I always treated people like people and was nice to them. I could be totally nice until it was time to not be nice. And then you turn that on, you gain compliance, and then you go right back to being nice again, because this isn't personal. So that's the way I looked at it. And that's kind of what got me through my career.
It's all right. I try not to get too bogged down in this. Questions keep coming up, and that always goes. But so I guess we'll shift here into, I'm curious about the pipeline, the transition into becoming a detective. My understanding is that is a more senior officer typically, but is that a natural progression, or is that something you choose to shift into as an officer? And how did all that happen for you?
Yeah, that's something that you choose. You can stay on patrol and, drive a car for 25 years if you wanted. And some people are really, really happy doing that. For me, it's not what I wanted. I always wanted to dig and overturn the rocks. And, one of the benefits of working in that small town is there was no, the idea is there's no call too small. So whether you got your credit card stolen, somebody broke into your car, or, your wife was murdered, we're going to do everything we can to solve that. And we're going to throw all of the resources at it, from crime scene to tech to science to investigators to interviews, all of that. And working in that small town, I was able to do that. And in doing so, I learned how to turn over rocks and look underneath them and chase the leads and follow up and follow through. and ultimately was very successful at closing a lot of those cases. But when I came to the bigger city, and when I got to the bigger city, and I came to the bigger city in 2010 in the Pacific Northwest, and I came here because my son had some medical issues that he couldn't get medical care for in Alaska. So we needed to be in the Portland, Oregon area to get medical care. And I was, I needed to keep my career, so I lateraled down. That's what got me down to the Pacific Northwest. But when I got down to the Pacific Northwest, I worked patrol for a couple of years, but on patrol in a large city, if you spend time turning over all of those rocks and investigating all of those things, you get bogged down and the calls start stacking up and your peers hate you because you spend 2.5 hours on a, stolen check case because I'm doing all that investigation. So for me, while it was fun kicking in doors and pointing guns and all that kind of stuff and the, tactical operations, all that was cool. For me, I wanted to be somewhere where I felt more effective and at home, and that was in that investigation detective unit. So that's why I applied for it and was ultimately assigned as a detective in 2013.
Okay. And so how far into your career was that?
Ish. 11 years, 12 years.
Okay.
11 years.
And that immediately gets you thrust into homicide and the child abuse stuff?
Yeah, I started off, just doing the small calls. Probably the first year I was helping on homicides and helping on the bigger cases, but they were just trying to figure out who I was. Because again, they don't know me from anybody. They don't know my, 9 years, 10 years of history in Alaska turning over rocks or my interview skills or my search warrant skills or anything like that. So getting into this new unit, you're a boot, you're a new guy. So they got to feel you out. And then once they started to see, what I was capable of doing and what my history was, then I advanced pretty quickly. And within, the first 12 to 18 months, I was assigned on the homicide team. I was leading homicides and assigned to the child abuse team, doing child abuse cases. And then that's where I, stayed the rest of my career. I came out of child abuse after about a year or 2 years, and then was pretty much strictly homicide for the next, 9 years.
What's the toll like working cases like that? And specifically, I'll ask more about the homicide stuff, but even how, because you had a family by this point, right?
Yeah. I had family this whole time.
And you had kids when you started working these cases?
I did. Yep. My kids were, I don't know. My kids were 10 years old, 8, 9, 10 years old, something like that.
What was that like, being thrust into that world, especially having had young kids at the time?
Yeah, that's, it was, it was a challenge, but something happened. So, I got to go back to when I was 13 years old, talk about that first dead body case real quick, because that'll paint the picture for where I'm going to go next. So, okay. That 13-year-old, as an explorer riding to that dead body, I was in dispatch when that call came in. And when the call came in, it was a body had been found in the woods in a shallow ravine near a creek, and we needed to go to it. So my officer came and got me, and we only had about a mile drive before we got to the scene. But in that mile drive, my anxiety was high. I was nervous. I'd never seen a dead body before. It's been laying there 7 months. Oh my gosh, is he going to be maggoty? What's it going to look like? All of these things were going through my head, and there was this anxiety, stress, and a little bit of fear. So we got to the call, and as we got there, I kind of sat in my seat, and the officer said, "Hey, you're not going to learn anything if you don't get out of the car." So we got out of the car and we walked over to the ravine and looked down, and sure enough, there's a body, and he's laying face down. So we walked down to the body, and my officer that I'm with says, "Hey, do you got any gloves?" "Yeah." "Put them on." So we put them on. He's like, "Help me roll them over." So I reached over, and I'm still feeling all this nerves and anxiety. And I reached over and grabbed the opposite shoulder and kind of rolled him back to me. Now this guy's face up looking at me. And all of a sudden, all of those feelings that I had were gone. All that anxiety, fear was gone. And it was literally matter of fact, what do we do next? Well, we need to palpate the body from head to toe. So that means you feel the body. You're feeling for defects, deformities, blah, blah, blah. So we do that. We sweep. Is there blood anywhere? Is there gross bleeding? So we do all this stuff with the body, kind of this initial stages of this death investigation. We check the eyes. We check all this stuff. And I got back in the car, and that is the first time, hindsight, knowing what I know now, my nervous system shut down. I stopped processing it, and I kind of went numb and cold. And that was the first time that ever happened. But in the law enforcement world, that wouldn't be the last. That's the way that I went into all of the calls for the rest of my career. I may be nervous showing up, but as soon as that door closes, it's business, it's cold, and it, quote unquote, didn't affect me. Whether that was death investigations or child molesters or autopsies or baby autopsies or whatever it is, I went in, it was, a piece of evidence. We're doing business, we're moving through it. We're very matter of fact. We check the boxes, we make the bullet points, we go back, we debrief, we investigate who's responsible, we find them accountable and hold them accountable and send them to jail.
Just compartmentalize it and move on.
Yeah, and we move on to the next one. So to ask me what it's like, in those with my kids and that type of stuff, I didn't think that it bothered me. I went to work and I did my cases. I was effective at it. I was good at it. And I come home and I'm still a dad and a father, and it doesn't bother me. That was on, what I thought. Unbeknownst to me, it was bothering me, because all that stuff that I was seeing, experiencing, and feeling was seeping in through my cracks and crevices, and it was saturating that internal sponge that I have. But I didn't realize it. People around me could realize it. That was part of being high strung. That was part of being an asshole. That was part of thinking the world was out to get me. That was part of hating everybody.
And you gotta be strong.
I just thought that was me, but it wasn't. That was all that exposure, saturating that sponge. And, so that was, I guess, how it affected me. I didn't think it was affecting me, but at the end of the day, ultimately a few years later, it ended my career.
And so how did that come to be? I mean, it's as things are reaching their boiling over point, or was it, you hear about substance abuse or just destructive behaviors? Like what was going on when it did start to finally become at least apparent to someone that, or even to you maybe, that it was something bigger than that this was affecting you?
Yeah. So, I moved along in life just thinking everything was normal. If you've got this stereotypical cop in your mind, that thinks they're the toughest thing, and they always got their back to the door, and they carry guns and knives on them all the time, and they're ready to take on the world, and they're looking for a bank robbery every time they step into a bank. That was me. And that's kind of that hypervigilance is the world that I lived in. And I always reacted, and this was throughout my career, especially since I came into detectives, but I always reacted above and beyond whatever the stimulus called for. So I would go overboard on my reactions, both emotionally, physically. If we got into a fight, I was using 150%, versus 110% that could have got the job done. If I felt like there was always an emergency, and I always responded as such. I didn't realize at the time that was my brain being stuck in fight, flight, freeze. And, essentially there was always a fire alarm ringing in my brain, but there was never a fire. So every time, I got a startle, somebody stepped into my cubicle, literally my startle response was to punch them. I don't know how many coworkers I punched when they came into my cubicle and put their hand on my shoulder, and I spun around and hit them in the gut, because that was my startle response. And I thought that was normal for me. So all these things are happening over a period of years. I'm dealing with child abuse every single day. For the majority of my homicide career, I juggled between 5 and 9 homicides at any given time. So I always had active homicides.
Cases that you're handling?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 to 9 homicide cases. And in those homicide cases, I'm running the entire investigation. So I might have 5 detectives working for me, or I might have 175 detectives working for me. And we're all, I'm juggling all of these pieces. And you can only do so much. Working a 36-hour day for me was not abnormal. I would go to work and work 25, 35-hour days all the time. We would work, go home, get a couple hours sleep, and come back, because that was that internal drive that I had for the job, that same drive that put me in a police car for 4,000 hours as a 13-year-old. And that is what the standard that I expected the people working for me to meet and keep up with. And I was burning people out, but I didn't care, because all I cared about was solving that case. So as I continue to do this for, a decade and handle, hundreds of homicide cases and hundreds of child abuse cases, and one of the big things was I may be working a case today that we are, an inch away from putting handcuffs on somebody. And then the phone rings with a fresh homicide. And all of a sudden, that case that I was about to solve goes on the back burner, and I might not touch it for 6 months. And now I got to go do another one. So there's never really time for completion. And all of that stacked up inside of my head. So I've got all of this stuff going on. And when I was, 2022, 2023, we are post George Floyd. We are post all the rioting and stuff that was going on in COVID. And during COVID and George Floyd, that took a lot of good police officers out of the career field, especially in the liberal politics near the city of Portland, Oregon. The city literally burned for months, and police officers
let it happen.
They let it happen, and they encouraged it. And the DA comes out and tells people, hey, we're not going to prosecute any crimes related to rioting, including assault on a police officer. So now it's an open statement to go out and fight with the police. And then we know we're going out there to do this, and then nobody is going to get held accountable for it. So in that environment, we lost a lot of cops. And as you can imagine, the stress compounded daily. And every time we lose somebody else, we got to do more with less in this shitty environment. So all of those things are happening. And then in 2022, I get into a fight at work. And as a result, it was a training situation. But as a result, I break 3 ribs. And I went to, I didn't go to the doctor at first because they will heal. And I was all bruised up and stuff. But about 4 or 5 days in, I started feeling my ribs, and I could feel that I'm actually missing sections of bone in my ribs. So I needed to go to the doctor. So I went to the doctor, and my blood pressure was 185 over 145. And the doctor's like, hold on a second, what the hell's going on? So we did a bunch of medical tests, and we couldn't come up with, anything medical to support it. She's like, well, what do you do for work? What is your environment like? So I told her, and I'm like, I said, I've been a police officer for 21 years. I'm a homicide detective. This is the cases I juggle. I work 35 hours all the time. I have nightmares. I get chased through my dreams by things that I can't see. I'm constantly getting into shootings and attacked in my sleep. I get about 2 hours of sleep at night. I said, my partner was killed in the line of duty in 2002. Never really processed or dealt with that. I said, I've planned my own funeral since 2003. I go down this whole list. And she's like, you have PTSD. And I'm like, no, I don't. I said, PTSD is for quitters. It's for losers. It's for people that want to get out of doing work. I said, I don't. I said, I got to go back to work. I got more stuff. I got more cases to solve. And she's like, if you don't take time off, it's going to kill you. She said, right now you're at stroke level blood pressure. And if you don't do something, you will die. So after some arguing, she called me. She called my hospital, my office, and told them that I wasn't fit for duty and that I needed to get some mental and medical help. So that's the first time she enrolled me in a counselor. And I went to the counselor begrudgingly, and it took probably 6-8 weeks for me to, through seeing that counselor and that therapist, I really was fighting that PTSD diagnosis, and I didn't want to accept it. So I've got more murders to solve.
Where do you feel that came from? That, because that mentality, I get the high strung, the feeling like, all right, no, I'm not a bitch, but did you view that differently or was it the same across the board? If you heard PTSD, if you heard someone who went to war and was, in the heart of combat, and they came back and said that yeah, hey, I've been struggling PTSD. Was that also, you're like, hey, that's bullshit kind of thing, get through it? Or was it specific? Was it an individualized thing? Was it just police officers that you felt that way? Like what was that?
No, I think it was across the board, Zach. Police officers where I thought PTSD, back when I started law enforcement, I went through my academy, and, you got to understand, I started in law enforcement 10 years, 15 years before my career started, right? Being around the police department. Yeah. And PTSD was something that your feelings weren't talked about. Emotions weren't spoken about. You literally wash the blood off and go to the next call. Yeah. And anybody that was, considering PTSD, they were weak. They were less than. They couldn't cut it. They weren't man enough. and they were looking for an out. They were looking for an easy out, and they were pussies.
Yeah.
And that is the way that it was bred into me, early on. So that is the same mentality. So yeah, law enforcement, military, it didn't matter. I thought PTSD was a joke. Therapy dogs? Are you kidding me? You don't need a therapy dog. That was the mentality that I had. And, and it took that 6 weeks of feeling this way. It got so bad, Zach, that I started having like mini seizures. So the whole right side of my body, they look like strokes. The whole right side of my body would go numb, and I would fall down, and I couldn't feel, and I couldn't talk, and my tongue would swell, and my lips would swell. And so I got hospitalized with that, and they couldn't figure out what it was. It looked like strokes. And then there was an interview that I had with workers' comp people where I had to talk about, 10 things, 12 things that happened throughout my career that were traumatic events. And I started with my partner getting killed in the line of duty, which I was directly involved in, and kind of went from there. I went chronologically throughout my career. And about halfway through that interview, I am bawling. And I realized that the way that I parent, the way that I act, the way that I talk, the way that I'm a friend, the way that I'm a husband, the way that I'm a cop, everything has to do with something that I experienced in my career. And that is the moment that I recognized PTSD was real. And I started my healing journey at that point.
I don't want to drag you into talking about details here. That's not what I'm doing, but I feel
I'll talk about anything.
Okay. Your partner.
Yep. So John Watson. I used to ride with John Watson as an explorer. About half of those or a third of those hours that I rode as an explorer with John Watson.
So you met him as a child.
Yeah. John Watson was actually there when I did my first ride along at 8 years old. John Watson was working the shift that day.
Jeez.
So he was working the shift that day. He was a brand new cop. Then at 13, I come back. I remember him from when I was 8, and he is now a mentor of mine for 4 years. Then I leave and I come back as a police officer, and John Watson was one of my field training officers, and then he, was a shift partner with me. So now we're out taking calls together. And it was Christmas, my first year on the job, Christmas of my first year, and I was supposed to work Christmas night, and my wife wanted to go to Arizona to visit her family for Christmas. So I asked my sergeant said, you can go, and he ordered John to work my shift on Christmas night. And John didn't want to work because he had 18, 19 years on the job at this point, whatever it was. It was his wife's birthday, and he had plans, but he was ordered to work that shift. So I got to go to Arizona, and he was ordered in. So he works that shift at about 8 o'clock that night. They get a call of a suspicious circumstance where it's Christmas night, everybody's having dinner, and this family way across another city, 30 miles away, is having dinner, and this guy, unknown girl, and their dog walk into the living room of their house, and the guy sits down at the table and eats dinner with them while the girl and the dog wait in the living room. Everybody's looking at everybody like, who the hell is this dude, and why is he at our kitchen table? And then after the guy gets done eating, he just gets up, puts his plates in the sink, and then gets his girlfriend and leaves. So they're like, anybody know that guy? No. So he's a stranger. So they call the police and give the license plate. That car lived in our city. John went to go check out the address where that car's registered. And he got there. It was about 17 degrees below zero that night. It was dark. And the address was about 6-8 miles from the police department, kind of in a rural area. And John got there, and there was nobody home. So he leaves, and it's a really long road to get back to where this house was. And on the road, he passes the car. So he turns around on the car and tries to traffic stop him, and the guy continues on in to his house, pulls up in the driveway. John gets out, contacts him, and John allows the girlfriend and the dog to go inside, and then a fight ensues between John and the bad guy when John tries to handcuff the bad guy. So fight ensues. Bad guy takes John's gun and puts John on his knees and shoots him between the shoulder blades, and then shoots him in the back of the head and kills him. So at that point, prior to the shooting, John was able to put out, that he needed assistance. And the police officers from the, city responded. Only a couple of them. They responded. And when they get there, They find John's car there, 17 below. John's face down in bloody snow. The doors are open to his police car and the lights are going. And as soon as they get there, they look up and they see a male figure in the window holding a gun. And that guy in the house is dark inside. And the guy retreats away from the window. And then they get into about a 5-hour standoff. And ultimately, the guy surrenders.
Was he mentally ill? I mean, like
the guy.
Yes.
So he was. And earlier you spoke about, you meet a guy one day and he's great. You meet a guy one day and he's, a turd. Yeah. So about a month prior to this, I get sent. It's 10 o'clock at night. I get sent to a duplex kind of in the heart of our city. And there's a prowler call. It's 10 o'clock at night. They hear somebody moving around outside in the snow and breaking tree branches and stuff. So I go, and the duplex has a left and a right side. And our target, our potential prowler, is on the left side, back left corner. So I approach it from the right. Well, when I come around the right side, a guy steps out onto his porch. And he's a white male, leather jacket, sweater, gold necklace on the outside of the sweater, like the kind of a turtleneck collar type of thing. And then he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, your neighbors here say there's a prowler over there. And, I'm going to go check it out." He's like, "Well, you're by yourself. Do you want cover?" I'm like, "Yeah, come with me." So he walks with me. So he and I walk around, and there's ultimately a moose on the backside of this house. Mm-hmm. So we make our way all the way around. It's not a prowler. And I shake his hand. He goes inside. And, we spoke for 15 minutes or something out there. Then I shake his hand. He goes inside. We move on with life. He is the guy that killed my partner a month later.
Whoa. So that was supposed to be your shift, right?
Yes.
And you'd met the guy a month earlier.
Yep. So it took me a long time to get over that. I didn't process that, Zach, until I was out of law enforcement, until I realized PTSD was something. And it still took me a long time to process that. It was a lot of therapy to understand and come to grips with that whole thing. There was a lot of survivor's guilt. There was a lot of guilt that he was covering my shift on his wife's birthday and got killed while I was on vacation, enjoying myself, quote unquote. I wasn't there for my team when my team had to respond in and deal with the shittiest call of their life. I wasn't there to help them. I showed up after the fact, 24 hours later when I got an emergency flight home. I'm there for all the crying. But then, Zach, we didn't debrief it. We never had a sit down to say, "Hey, tell us about every part of this." We didn't debrief it. That's part of that not getting into mental health, not talking about your feelings.
Your command there was a couple, didn't demand that was a thing?
No, there was a meeting that I wasn't even invited to. And it was like, for the people that actually responded to the call that night, tell us what you did. Where were you? Well, this is what we did. How does everybody feel? Everybody feels great. Anybody want help? Nope. Anybody want counseling? Nope. All right, go back to work. That's the way it was.
You said that was 2003, right?
Yeah, that was 2002, I believe. When that happened.
Wow. It's bonkers, man. But it's not the first time that I've heard that. I had another gentleman on here who was, he had to kill someone in the line of duty, and his name was Adam Myers. And same thing. He's like, "Yeah, I killed a woman." And then no debrief, no nothing. They just sent me home that night. Once I was clear, I sent me home in my patrol car in my town where it was just on the news that I had to kill somebody. No debrief. But I feel like you guys losing one of your own, and the fact that there was nothing, is even more insane than that almost somehow. What did you realize over the course of the years following that you, on any level, did you register that you hadn't processed that and that was haunting you?
Yes.
Okay. Were you scared to confront it? Do you think that was some of not wanting to face all that stuff?
Yeah, well, I didn't know that it could be dealt with, first of all. You got a blind spot. You don't know what you don't know. Yeah. So I didn't know that it could be dealt with. I didn't realize that therapy was a thing and PTSD was something real. So looking at it from the lens that you just wash the blood off and move on to the next call, it's kind of the way life was. It haunted me that the survivor's guilt and all that stuff haunted me. It haunted me that I wasn't involved in the little meeting that they did have at the police department. You know, it wasn't because I wasn't there that night. I didn't get invited to the meeting. Doesn't mean it affected me any less. And yeah, I just think that, you know, I think I didn't deal with it because I didn't know. I didn't know to deal with it. I started planning my funeral. Within 6 months of that, I planned my funeral. Who my pallbearers are, what songs they're going to play, you know, I mean, what passages are going to be read. I had a funeral file my entire career. And as people would change in my life, you know, friends or coworkers, I would change the people in that profile, who my pallbearers were going to be, who's going to be on the front right corner. I literally planned out my funeral. I thought it was normal. My therapist says it's not. I thought it was normal. So yeah, it did haunt me. And it didn't really come to a head until I realized that I had to deal with it in therapy and, you know, post law enforcement. And that is where things really started to come together for me and I started to get a grip on it.
You know, I think something that's people don't realize a lot of times, that I'm curious to see if this was a immediate fit for you with your therapist. Like, first of all, therapy's obviously it's hard. It's very difficult to first admit that you need help and then to actually start doing the work to confront stuff. But, you know, people also don't realize a lot of times you aren't going to click with someone. Like you are developing a relationship with someone, and like sometimes you have to shop around and find someone who you can work with. And for you, what did that look like? Was this another police officer? Was this all through the department? How did all that go down?
Yeah. So, I went to therapy in 2012. 2012, I was having a really bad go at life. I was depressed. And 2012, June 13th, 2012, I had a gun in my mouth in the woods. I was going to kill myself. At the final second, it didn't, but realized that I needed some help. I went to a therapist then, and it was a crappy experience. I go in, I tell this guy everything. I'm like, this is where I am. This is how I'm feeling. And at the end of this session, he's like, you know what? I'm getting ready to retire. Your problems are too deep for me. You need to find somebody else. Go back to your EAP. So with that, and I was just, you know, confessed everything to this guy. I didn't touch therapy for another 10 years. Then once I came out of law enforcement and I was ordered to therapy, that first therapist that I had, he was great for the immediate crisis that I was in, because I was in crisis. He was good for that crisis. But when it came anything deeper than that, we really lost our ability to connect. So, you know, at about that 10, 12 week mark, we ran out of things to talk about, and he started asking me about, you know, what kind of gun he should buy for home defense. And at that point, I realized that, you know, maybe we're not as effective as we could be. So I went back to my police department, and at the time, there is a lady. Our police department has a not employee assistance program, a law enforcement, you know, mental health program that the peers run. It's a peer-run group. And as a result, the city will pay for some therapy at one of like 5 different therapists. So I chose I chose her geographically, first of all, because she was close to where I live. The city would pay for it. She's culturally competent. Her husband is a police officer and has been for 30 years. So she knows the business and she's well respected. So I went to her, and that was an absolute godsend. She and I connect. We have a relationship. And she, you know, I've seen her, I don't know, several hundred times, and she has been really my lifeline to get through this whole process. A good therapist is amazing. A bad therapist can do more harm than good.
Yes.
I could say that if you hook up with one, I'm not going to use the word connect. If you hook up with one and your spidey sense is like, this isn't the right person, we're not connecting the dots, move on and find somebody else. Because when you find that right one, you're going to know it immediately. And that is where you're going to find success.
That's interesting. I've had the same therapist basically since I shot myself, almost, right? Like I was initially taken to a private hospital, so I had some mental health stuff there. But once I was stabilized and out of the ICU, they transferred me to the VA, and I've had the same therapist since then. I did not like her at first, but like I didn't have a choice but to stick with her. I'd never done therapy or anything until then until I had a bullet hole in my forehead and had to. And it was, but it does, like, once it clicks, like it didn't take long. It took a couple sessions, but like once it clicked, it is, I mean, it's like when you feel like in any other, again, you're building a relationship. You get that intuition of like, yes, there's something right here.
It's a great feeling. You know,
Yeah.
the most, I don't know about you, Zach, your church branch is, but the most impactful times for me in therapy, a lot of times is when I go in not knowing what we're going to talk about. You know, if we have an agenda, then okay, I know we're going to talk about, John today. But yeah, if we go in and I'm like, I really don't know what we're going to talk about, that is, for me, is when the pure magic happens and we stumble into something and we're like, we uncover those big epiphanies. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's made you, I guess, more aware of things that you do need to work on in your life, and not even in the context of I need to work on it in therapy, but more aware of maybe maladaptive things that are starting to develop and stuff like that?
Yeah, totally. I'm very aware.
Yeah.
Therapy, coming out of law enforcement and getting away from the paramilitary, high speed, low drag, everybody is a badass, the world's going to kill me, I need to carry 17 guns to protect myself. Getting away from that mentality that comes in law enforcement was huge for me. And it's not like you can just turn it off overnight, right? Cops put up this shield of armor. We put ourselves in the corner and we protect ourselves and all this kind of stuff. It's just the way cops do.
Yeah.
But it took time to separate from that. Once I was able to separate from that and focus on the healing side, absolutely, it made me aware of feelings, first of all, because I hadn't felt anything in 20 years.
Yeah.
And I could go into the worst crime scene and see the absolute worst thing involving children. And I'm like, hey, can we grab a cup of coffee first? Because I'm a little parched. That's just the way that it was. And it's not that I didn't care. It's just that I was desensitized to it. So learning how to feel was huge. Once you open up the floodgates of feeling, oh my gosh, your whole world changes. For me, it made me aware of how I was parenting and how I was being a husband and a father. And, those things change slowly over time. And everything that we ever see, feel, touch, smell, experience, all of those things are stored in our brain. I don't care if you're 2 years old or 200 years old. All that stuff is stored in our brains. And through therapy, those boxes slowly start to unpack. And you have to deal with those issues, good and bad. And in dealing with those things, you said it's painful to work through. It's hard to work through. It totally is. But from my experience, I was having to work through all of those, unpack all those boxes and deal with hurts that I had done and deal with wrongs. And as a result, it made me just more aware as to what my surroundings were and how I was interacting and interfacing with the world. And it has just made me a completely different person today than I was, figuratively speaking, yesterday. And I've got a closer relationship with my wife and my kids than I have ever. I've never had a relationship with my wife and kids. I've been married to them. I've been their father. There's never been a true relationship. And I have got that now, and it's so beautiful.
Do you think that was because the desensitization didn't get turned off? It's not, I'm desensitized to everything, not just this crime scene that I'm at, and then I go home and now I'm good again. Like, you just had a guard up all the time.
Yeah, I think it was the desensitized. Earlier I mentioned that internal sponge soaking. That internal sponge would soak with all the negative shit in my world, and you can't shake that. You work 4 or 5 days in a row. And at my last case, I was working 150 hours overtime, or 150 hours a week. There's only 168 hours in a week. I had 18 hours off every week for 4 months. So when you're working that kind of pace for 20 years and you're running your engine in the red for 20 years without ever slowing down for an oil change, something has to break. And for me, it was my tie with my family. I was so focused and dedicating on work and solving the murder and helping somebody else's family that I literally came home, gave my family the shit that was left. They had to walk on eggshells so they wouldn't set dad off. Yeah. And I would get up the next morning after 4 hours sleep and go do it again. And in my mind, I'm a hero. At home, if it wasn't for my wife, I wouldn't have a home today. If it wasn't for her holding the family together and protecting me and protecting our marriage and protecting my family, I wouldn't have a family today, because nothing I was doing was contributing or deserving towards a family. I was literally allowing my family to crumble while I saved everybody else's. And that was because of my drive for doing the job. And the drive for doing the job is a couple of reasons, which I didn't recognize till after law enforcement. But the drive for doing the job, one, I repeat what my dad did. Everything that I'm talking about, the long hours, the eggshells, that was my dad again. My dad worked oil field. I'm a cop. But at the end of the day, the work ethic was the same. The other thing is and this didn't come out until after law enforcement is when this came out through therapy. I was molested when I was 9, 10, 11 years old and never told anybody. And it was male on male, full molestation rape. And this happened in Louisiana. I never disclosed it back then. I never told anybody. I knew my dad or my family would kill him if they knew this guy was half a dozen years older than me, 10 years older than me, something like that. And I think a lot of my drive for why I did what I did was to be a voice and to validate my victims like nobody did for me. Nobody was going to do to my victims, again, what happened to me because I know how it affected me. So, and there's other molestation in my family. There's other sexual abuse in my family that came out prior to me being a cop. And there was a ton of personal drive to make sure that this shit didn't happen to somebody else. And if it did happen, those people got a voice and those people got called a victim. Adults make themselves victims because they put themselves in shitty circumstances and they go to a bar, they leave their car unlocked, they come back out and their stereo's gone. Well, don't leave your car unlocked, dumbass. A child who earns the title victim is truly a victim, and they don't have the voice to speak for themselves. The dead person is truly a victim and doesn't have a voice to speak for themselves. When I was 9, 10, 11 years old, I didn't have a voice to speak for myself, and nobody else did for me. That was my drive for why I did what I did.
And you only realized that all those years later.
Correct. I obviously knew about the molestation, but yeah, I didn't connect the dots as to what my drive was until my career was over.
What is it that made you finally open up about that to your therapist specifically? If you hadn't told anyone, like why? I'm asking. I feel like that's probably important for someone else to hear who's been through something like that, who's listening right now.
Yeah, because for me, a couple things. So there was three important people in my world at the time: my wife, my therapist, and my partner at work. And my partner and I were very close. Her name is my partner and I were very close. And I disclosed. I can't remember who I disclosed to first, but it was one of those three. And what got me there was that analyzation of why am I the way that I am? Why am I pushing so hard for this? Why did I want to be a homicide and child abuse detective for 30 years? And then, once I'm able to feel, because I never felt the feelings of the molestation or how it affected me, I tuned them out. I went from being 8, 9, 10 years old to an explorer uniform where I don't feel, to a cop where I don't feel, to a career where I don't feel. Now I'm coming out and I'm turning on the feelings again, and I'm starting to process these things. So for me, I had to, why have I allowed my family to crumble for so many years when I go and work 36 hours straight to speak for some kid who I've never met before, or speak for some dead person who I've never met before? Why would I sacrifice my own for that? And, in that, there's several layers you have to unpack. But as that came up, it just really was put on my heart about my situation and how I never told, and how I've been dealing with all these kids for years who had the courage and guts to come forward and talk about what happened to them. Yet I'm sitting there in the same room with them, thousands of them, and I have the same story, but I don't tell it. I've never told it to anybody. And I've never recognized the connection that me fighting for them is really me fighting for myself when nobody else would. And that is when it came out. It started just to kind of develop. And I'm like, this just makes sense. And I've been hiding behind my pain through excessive work for others, So That's how it came out.
Yeah, well, and it's crazy because then, that you, even as a 13-year-old, just entirely threw yourself into that. Like, and I mean, it makes sense. Like, do you feel like getting to a point where you have talked about it, and it sounds like probably, at least, I don't know if that's something you can ever fully process, but have done some thinking through and, analyzing like that helped you get to the point where you don't need to do that anymore? When I say that, the drown yourself in work.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was part of it. The me not drowning myself in work part, that is, there's a lot more to that than the molestation. That's just part of the equation of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. Me not drowning myself in work, my work-life balance there was no work-life balance. It was work. And life is what I would come home and walk on and then go back to work. So coming out and realizing that, I came out of law enforcement, it was very obvious to me. I came out with PTSD. When you have PTSD and you have a claim against your city or your agency or whoever, there's dollars and cents attached to that. And if I come out with PTSD and say I was injured as a result of the job, then they ultimately may have to pay out some money. Mm-hmm. But in law enforcement, we have this idea, there's a thin blue line. We're a family. We all hug. We cry together. Oh my gosh, it's this big, kumbaya family. That's all bullshit. Put yourself between the dollars and dollar signs and the department. They're going to choose the department every single time. The city is going to choose the department. They are a business. I got told through this process that I was nothing more than a number on a profits and loss statement, and their job was to keep the profits column bigger than the loss column. I got told that my job was no more important than the dump truck driver that I was next to on the city employee list. My union did not fight for me. There were some issues that needed to be fought for. My union didn't fight. I was out of work for 18 months on my PTSD, and I didn't get a call from a single person except my lieutenant, who asked me to bring my car back so it could have the oil changed. Other than that, nobody cared. This idea of them being a family was bullshit. So now I have sunk 21 years into this quote unquote law enforcement family to fight for them and to put myself on the line and my life on the line and sacrifice my family and my wife and everybody else for this family and this idea that they have that we're all, doing God's work. All that's bullshit. At the end of the day, I'm nothing more than a number. And that is what helped me get that work-life balance perspective and to, balance things out and realize I don't have to work 100 hours a day. I don't have to be performance driven. I don't have to go give a good performance and, really knock this case out of the park to get the accolades and the claps and the attaboys, my name in the newspaper, and then rinse and repeat and do it again. I can find joy other places in life than law enforcement. That is what helped me separate and kind of slow down from the immersion into work.
Who the fuck made that comment to you about the balance sheet and basically your work not just being another, you're like the rest of us?
It was our city legal department.
Wow.
I had asked for an early on separation because it's been going on for my fight with them went on 3 years with trying to get a payout. And at the end of the day, Zach, my payout was pennies. At the end of the day, they negotiated my payout like you would a used car sales deal. They're asking $100,000 for the car. I want 150,000. We go back and forth until we come at 102,000 and everybody goes home happy. It's literally a car deal negotiation. And that's how my career ended after 3 years. But getting to that 3 years, there were some talks of, can I do this? Or can I do a settlement and just buy me out? I just want to be done with the city. I need to get this monkey off my back before I can really start fresh, because every time I turn around, this thing is sucking me back in. I'm still tied to this governmental agency. And they wouldn't do it. So one day I'm on the phone with legal department. Legal was on the phone, and I also had a risk assessment on there. And between legal and risk assessment, I can't remember which one told me, but they're like, yeah, you're a number on a profits and loss statement. And we would settle for you, but our job is to keep the profits column higher than the loss column. So we're not going to settle. We're going to fight you.
That is so fucking disgusting. Yeah.
So that's the way that it went.
Wow. And you're not the only one that's happened to.
Not at all.
Like, That's fucking disgusting. I mean,
Yeah.
real, and that's, I think also the like dismissiveness of another human being to say that to someone who's,
Yeah, they don't care. The PTSD, and I mean, you've been there. The PTSD, the depression, that's literally why you put a gun in your mouth. And that's what I'm out on. I'm out on this. And the peers, the group of 11, 12 people that I worked with every single day, and we solved big shit together, and we were a team. And like, I left on a Thursday, never went back to work. Like that Thursday, I thought I was like the center of the frickin' wheel. I thought the world revolved around me because I was, of what I was doing. And to leave and never get a phone call for 18 months. Nobody called to check in on me and say, hey, how are you? It just went to show what a farce it really was. Anyway, so.
yeah, I don't have PTSD, but the depression, obviously I know very, very well. That actually, you kind of offhandedly mentioned it, but you were rolling and I didn't want to stop you, but I did want to ask you, you mentioned being at the point where you almost tried to kill yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What was it out there in the woods that pulled you back?
I got a phone call from a coworker. Phone call from a coworker says, hey, let's go grab a beer. Let's go do something. What are you doing? I'm thinking about you. Just go grab a beer.
Knew you were struggling.
Yeah. And I don't know that he really knew I was struggling. It was a random phone call. It was a person that I don't talk too much. People knew I was struggling. I would go to work every night and I would sit getting dressed out in my locker room, and there was 10 other guys around me coming and going. And I'm sitting there for months on end bawling. I am like bawling, getting dressed out in this locker room, putting on this uniform to go out into the field. I go out onto the street and I get into a fight with everybody that I contact. Every single person. If you didn't immediately comply, I was kicking your ass. And that was abnormal behavior for me. I was pissing off the dispatchers, pissing off our records clerks where they wouldn't talk to me. I had a record clerk that wouldn't talk to me for 2 years because I made her so upset. All this was abnormal behavior, yet none of my peers would address it with me. We are so good at covering each other. Yeah, it's tough. And we're so good at covering each other in the field. If I call for code 3 cover, I'm going to have 20 cops there in a minute. When there's code 3 cover needed inside my head between my 2 ears, people run from that because it's a hard, difficult conversation they don't want to get involved in.
It's fucking scary. And it's tough. This is very important to talk about. I beat the dead horse on this fucking thing, and I will until someone challenges my idea with something that changes my path here. And I'm not married to this idea, but I'm pretty fucking convinced of it right now. I think the warning signs that we are taught, in our society about suicide are total bullshit. And it is, you just painted that picture of it is changes in the baseline where it is, if someone had really stopped and paid attention, they could see there were those big changes in your baseline. It's not, oh, you went and posted something about, I'm ready to quit on Twitter or something like that. Is some people do express their depression or their suicidal ideations in that way. I think those people, I don't think those people are asking for help. I think they might think that they want to die, but I don't think they actually want to die. I think people who do want to die, and this is where it gets dangerous in terms of not matching those overt warning signs, is that it is those discreet, or maybe not even discreet, but they are more discreet than the outspoken actions or comments around being suicidal or giving your things away or telling, making these comments that hint to people that you're not doing well. But like for you, it is the combination of, you have to recognize those changes in the baseline and have that fucking hard conversation with someone when you see that. And it's, I'm sure you've probably had this conversation with someone before, I'm guessing, after having been through all the stuff that you've been through, but like, you have to be very direct with someone and just be like, hey, Aaron, I know this is, this is an uncomfortable conversation for me to have. And sorry if I'm putting you in a bad spot by doing it, but I'm worried about you for these reasons. I've noticed you're picking fights with people every time we go out on patrol. You're starting to ruin relationships within the department. You're crying in the locker room every time that we change out. Are you going to kill yourself? You have to be direct with someone about it.
Yeah, you really do. And what's funny is my partner that I ended up being, partners with in detectives, and she and I became very close. We worked a lot of cases together. I've told her all of this. She and I have spoke about all this. And she says, I knew you were having issues. She said, everybody was talking about it. Everybody was talking about you crying up there, and everybody was talking about you getting into fights. She laid out all the warning signs. She said, it wasn't my place to come talk to you. I'm a female. It's weird. My husband works for the department. She's like, I'm not going to come talk to you about it. She said, but I knew all this stuff was going on. And that really sucked, because people are willing to bullshit amongst each other, going car to car in a parking lot, but not willing to help save my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like that very well could have, obviously, I mean, you were on the cusp of it.
Yep.
That bothers me so much. That just, so much of this just fucking, and it like, again, people don't know. I think we do know inside, but I think it's one of those things where like, yeah, like your partner convinced herself somehow that wasn't her responsibility when she sees those problems.
Yeah.
I think that's probably pretty common. And in all walks of life, where people see that stuff and you don't realize until it's too late. Like, fuck.
Yeah, totally, man. I agree. I think it happens all the time. And people, we want to avoid, human beings, I believe, we avoid things that we're unfamiliar with or we're scared of, right? And whether that can be changing out the doorknob on your house or having a hard conversation. If we don't know how to do it or we're scared of it, we don't want to fail. We don't want to look like idiots. We don't want to, we don't want to fail. So, we avoid it. We avoid those things. How often does the doorknob, or the piece of trim on your house go completely unchecked for years? Not because you can't do it, because you don't know how to do it. And if you did it wrong, you don't look like an idiot. And when we start talking about human beings interacting, people avoid the things they're scared of. Why didn't anybody talk to me for 18 months? Not because they didn't like Aaron, not because they didn't love me. They didn't talk to me for 18 months because they didn't know what to say. Yeah. And they knew that I was out on something they'd never experienced, and it's unfamiliar and it's scary. So therefore they avoid it. And I forgive them for it. It is what it is. But, as humans, I think it's human nature.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. My hope is, the conversations like this, people hear it and that starts to change the way that they think. We're like, okay, maybe, that this may have turned on a light bulb in someone's mind. But like, you know what? I need to go check on Chris. This is, I'm seeing the same shit. I need to go say something. I'm going to go have that call or whatever, or call somebody and you unknowingly walk them off the ledge because they just needed someone to reach out at that point. And it just, these kinds of conversations can save lives. And so I appreciate you being so open about it all. I mean, I know it's not easy and that takes a lot of work to have gotten to the point where you can talk about all this. So,
yeah, Chris, Zach, I think that, I've said it on my podcast and I've said it 1,000 times, right? I don't think God gives us our pain without a purpose. And everything that I went through, there was a lot of pain. Everything you've been through, there's a lot of pain, but there's got to be a purpose on the backside. And if somebody can take something that you or I have experienced and change their lives or change or impact the lives of somebody else around them or save a life, then mission completed. That's what we're here for. We survive it and we tell others about it so they can learn from it, because I guarantee you, you and I are not the only people that have sat here and had conversations or had these thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I've had other people on here who've opened up about being on the cusp of suicide who hadn't talked about it before. It just, when you open the door for the conversation, and it can cause huge paradigm shifts for people, and it's important, man. And like, really, like, it's what I don't know in terms of like a self agency kind of, taking control or making the most of your situation. And what is more impactful than being able to use your experience or, in my case, my mistakes to hopefully help someone or, whatever hard lessons you've been through or whatever, it's being able to turn that into something that is hopefully paying it forward in some way so that someone else doesn't have to take that the same bad routes that you did. It's just, it's kind of the most you can hope for. We're supposed to learn from our mistakes. And I think putting them out there for other people to learn from is very, very valuable. But
I agree, buddy.
Murders to Music is everywhere, right?
Yep.
That is your podcast. I don't think we actually mentioned that earlier. I know we've mentioned that you have a podcast a couple of times, but what else? Where can people find you? What else? Are you still performing as a musician? Like, can people come watch you play right now?
Yeah, totally. I am.
Okay.
Yeah, Murders to Music is my podcast. And in that podcast, you've already heard about the murder side, right? And we've heard about that since 8 years old. So I talk about that. But the music side is I started playing drums when I was 5. And I started performing in bands when I was 13, and I've played in bands my whole life. So Murders to Music, I go from help. And then now, since I come out of law enforcement, I've opened up a company where I do live music and DJ and lighting and sound production for weddings and corporate events, but a lot of high-end weddings.
That's cool.
It's super cool. So now I get to help people. Instead of helping them on their worst days, I get to help them on their brightest days. And I get to make good memories instead of bad memories. So that's really cool. So the Murders to Music podcast talks about the transition, all of the stuff that we've spoke about today, super vulnerable, transparent. I tell it all. And then I talk about the transition and the healing and the brighter side of life and how you can get to that life on the other side. And everything is told where you don't have to be a cop. Everything is told no matter what walk of life you're in, you can get some value out of this. It's pretty cool. So that's that. And as far as playing, I still play. I'm in the Pacific Northwest. I've got a band called Double Down, and we play all over the Portland, metro area and wherever, but we're all over the place.
That is freaking cool, man. It just like such a beautiful way to kind of, again, the coming out on the other side of things where it is like what happier experience, I guess, other than like maybe having a child probably is the only other happier day people are going to have other than their wedding days. That's so cool. Do you feel like that's helped you come out on the other side of it, or were you already kind of there when you started doing that stuff?
No, it totally helped me. I started this. So, I was talking to another gentleman who's actually a Marine, and he has some PTSD issues, and he has a therapy dog, and he and I got connected through a mutual buddy. And at this time I wasn't DJing. This was back in 2022. I started DJing when I was 16 to 20. I DJ'd, stopped DJing when I became a cop. And, in 21, 22, I'm like, I'm going to get back into this. So I connect with a buddy of mine. He connects me with this other dude who's a Marine with some PTSD issues. And that's about the time I'm getting diagnosed. So we kind of connect. And he and I are literally cut from the same cloth. And it worked out well. So I mentored with him for about a year and then opened up my own business. And so now we collaborate and, we compete a little bit with each other.
That's healthy competition's good.
It's good, man. It's so good. But coming out on that other side, it is just, one of the things he told me was, Aaron, he says, I wanted to help people in the military. That's why I did it. And I don't know what he did in the Marines, but it was something high speed, low drag. He's like, I wanted to help people. He says, but when I came out on the other side, I needed to help them continue to help people, but I couldn't do it in the same way. He said, but I've, DJ'd my whole life. He says, so I got back into it about 10 years ago. And, this is now my company. It's what I do. He's like, and now I get to help them on their brightest day. So that resonated with me so much. Yeah. I'm so used to being the memory when I meet with you the first time and I tell you your child, your father, your mother is dead and been murdered, but I'm going to solve their case. Now I get to help it on the other side where I get to make the memories that you will remember forever. They will remember the most epic party. Yeah, totally. At their weddings. They're going to remember that most epic moments in those parties. And that for me is so exciting.
I love that, man. It's so cool. It's such a freaking, heavy, but powerful story. And I'm so glad that you're at a point where you can talk about it, man. Cause I know you're helping people with it. And I'm so glad we met. I think if I had to recommend to someone, I know I had checked out one episode of your podcast, and I think it was your wife interviewing you, or you just talking with your wife about some of this stuff before I went on. So it's been probably 5 months or so since then, but it was it's a great podcast. People need to go check it out. Google Murders to Music. What else, man? You got anything else you want to put out there before we wrap this up?
That's it, man. If you guys continue to support Zach and his efforts, check me out on any streaming platform, Murders to Music, all spelled out. You can email me at murders2music@gmail.com if you want to reach out and chat. And just help us out. Neither one of us are getting paid for this, and if we are, it's definitely not. I think I made $1.17 or something on my podcast so far. And I got 120 episodes, so do the quick math. It's less than a penny an episode. We're not doing it for the money. We just want to help people, and that's kind of our goal. So check us out, guys. Support us and share us with your friends. Yeah,
it's a lot of work, so please go support him. Thanks again, man. This was awesome. I'm glad we were finally able to focus on your side of things.
It's cool, man. So, thanks for letting me tell the story.
Yeah. And thanks everyone at home for listening to another episode of Going In Blind. Remember, if you haven't already and you've been listening for a while, take a second to rate and review the show wherever you're listening, especially if that's on Apple Podcasts. That just helps this thing get discovered by more people. And if you prefer to watch your episodes, these last, 10 episodes or so have been on video as well. So you can go over to YouTube and check us out there. If you do, then subscribe to the channel there. And remember, these are important conversations we're having here. So share them around with another curious mind who needs to hear it. And I'll see you next time. If I can find the stop button in this new platform.
I'll tell you when it stopped.
I don't know what's going on here. I did it. Oh. All right. Well, I was going to ask you a question here, but...
Go ahead. It's fine. You can edit out later.
Okay. Yeah. So just last thing here, I ask every guest that I have on, obviously this part will not be released, but I would not ask if I was not fully prepared to receive harsh criticism. You will not hurt my feelings. What could I do better?
Nothing, man. I think it went great. Okay. Yeah, nothing. Getting onto the Riverside was a little bit clunky in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And it was super slow. Something you probably didn't notice on your side, but maybe you did. On my side, my internet speeds are great, but on the Riverside platform, first of all, it won't play on Safari, and then on the Chrome, when you click the button, it takes 15-20 seconds for it to respond.
Really?
Which was weird. Yeah. Okay. So it says, enter your name and hit enter. So you enter your name, hit enter, and it takes probably 15 seconds for it to register and then move on to the next question. So it was kind of slow and draggy, but as far as the podcast went, nothing, man. It went great.
Okay. Yeah. I thought I was having issues with it just because of accessibility stuff, but if it's issues for guests too, then I will end up switching back to Zoom. I was just trying to up the quality of the audio here, or not the audio of the video, but,
have you used Ecamm?
No. Was that the one that you used? Cause that was the first time that I'd seen your platform that you were using.
Yep. Yeah. That's the one I used. I don't know what it is. I don't know how well it works for you in your application, but on my side of the house, Ecamm is super easy, user friendly, and it's a very simple user interface for the guest. How's
the video quality?
Great.
Is it
Video's
HD?
Great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the video quality. I mean, it's it is literally its function is recording, so you can. You can bring in your screen shares, or you can, connect to your phone. So I can have my phone as another camera if I want to show something or whatever.
Okay.
It's super cool. So
I'm going to have to check it out. This is just, I'm trying to increase the quality. So if I can, but okay. Well, thanks, man. I'll have to check that out. I think this will be out in about 2 months. When it does come out, I'll send you the links and all that stuff. And
sounds good, dude.
Try and send people your way for the podcast and all that stuff.
Sounds good, bro. If you need anything, let me know.
All right. Yeah, man. So YouTube, that goes both ways. If you need somebody to fucking talk to, I'm here to listen. you've got my number. I mean,
Same
that.
thing.
So,
same thing. Call anytime, buddy.
All right, man. Well, I'll talk to you at some point soon. But
Yep. See ya,
have a
bro.
good rest of your day.
You too, buddy.
All right, bye.